Okay, let's go on. The title of this is The Significance of Insignificance. That's probably a little hard to understand, but I wrote that. I have a chapter called that in my book, and it was occasioned by a young man who, after reading some of my manuscripts before I'd actually published it, he said, well, after I've read your stuff, I feel so insignificant. I feel like everything I do is insignificant. That, not only am I insignificant, but he was studying for a PhD in something or other. I'm not sure what it was, engineering, I believe. And he says, just getting the engineering degree doesn't seem important to anymore. It's not right. It's like, that's not what I need to be doing. And he was having this problem with everything seeming to be so insignificant, other than this idea of growing, becoming love, and whatever, like that's important. I wrote back to him and I said, no, it's not like that. Okay? You're here for a reason. You're here to interact. You're here to grow. This life is very significant. Yes, when you get an understanding, you may now have a bigger picture. And in some sense, you might say, well, my career isn't really that important in the big picture. But in the other sense, your career is even more important in the big picture, because it's part of your career, it's part of your interactions, it's part of the people you meet, it's decisions you make, it's the choices you make, it's part of your ability to grow, part of your challenges is to deal with that. Remember, we talked about the business guy. It's a challenge to deal with the firing of a non-functioning employee with grace and with love and with caring for that employee. You still may have to fire him, but there's a different approach, and it works whether you're doing engineering or whatever you're doing. And it's in this application is where the growth is. The growth isn't in the intellectual understanding. The growth is in the day-to-day application. So don't get to a place where you feel small, or that you feel it's impossible, or that it's just too big, oh, I can't do this, or it doesn't work. Or that all the things that you're doing now, oh, I go to work, I just turn a crank at work, and I come home, and then I turn a crank at home, and I go to work, and and our lives sometimes get to be kind of monotonous and repetitive and so on. We think, oh, I just need to lose that. I need to go do something else that's more important, not this insignificant stuff that I do that's repetitive every day. That's the wrong way of thinking about it. The stuff you do every day is important. You interact with people every day. You have lots of opportunities to make good choices for the right reasons. You can be helpful to people. You can understand. You can have empathy for these people. You can be useful, and it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter whether you are a nurse and you spend your day emptying bedpans, or whether you are the director of something big and very expensive. It just doesn't matter. It's all the same. There is nothing that's insignificant. Everything and everyone is very significant. We're each an individuated unit of consciousness, and the amount that we grow, the amount that we evolve, helps the whole system evolve. And whether that evolution is done with bedpans or whether it's done, in boardrooms, makes absolutely no difference. The opportunity to grow is the same in either case. So don't ever get to a point of feeling insignificant, and that your work is insignificant, and that this mundane life you live is insignificant. It's not as mundane as you think. Once you start living in the moment, there's nothing mundane about it. It becomes more alive, and you become more of a part of it, and that renews it, and it becomes more significant. Okay. The second thing I want to, I'd mentioned just once, but like to talk a little more about, is that this, and it kind of goes along with what I just said, this is a philosophy of engagement, not a philosophy of withdrawal. This is not an understanding that's cerebral and intellectual. This is an understanding to use, to apply to your life. If all you do is get the intellectual gist of it, and you understand every word I say, even if you memorize every word I say and every word in the book, it won't help you one little bit. That's not what's going to help you. What helps you is the application in your life as you interact with other people. That's what's important. That's where the action is. So when we talk about, well, you need to be detached, what we mean is you need to not have your ego involved. You can be very much attached in the sense of you're loving and you're caring and your compassion attaches you very much. That's fine. That helps you. If your ego is attached and your fear is attached, that's harmful. So you can be passionate in this. You can be committed, and you are important. And whatever it is you do in life, whether you stay home and take care of a house or whether you go out and move mountains, it's all significant. It's all very significant. And it's all just as equally likely to help you grow up as anything else. So this idea of kind of class and position and whatever, there's no advantages here in that. All the advantage is generated by yourself. Okay, not by anything you do or don't do. Okay, so that's kind of a fundamental thing. We're not here just to give you a lot of ideas and send you home with a gee whiz, that was kind of neat, and then go on with your regular life the next day and forget all about it. Then I will have failed. But if you go home with some kind of idea that these are interesting things and I'm going to experiment with it, I'm going to try, I'm going to see if my life will get better if I change my attitudes toward things, then I will have succeeded. So that's kind of how I see that. It's not an intellectual thing, it's a doing thing. Let's see. Oh, the last thing to underline is that, and I think I've said this before, but it's kind of an important concept, and that is you do not have to change your environment at all. Some environments may be easier than others in which to meditate, in which to grow yourself, but all environments are acceptable. You can make progress in any environment. So this sense of, I'm stuck here. I'd like to do this stuff, but I really can't. It doesn't fit in. I can't find the time. I'm just stuck. That's an excuse and not really a very good one. Whatever your situation is, whatever you do, however hard, however easy that is, you can do this. It is not about changing your life. When I first was doing these, I had lots of people saying, well, yeah, that sounds good. I should quit my job and become a monk someplace and maybe I could do this, but I can't do that, so what's the point? You see, that's just an excuse. You don't need to quit your job and become a monk or a nun or make spirituality or meditation your point of your life. They shouldn't be. Meditation's just a tool. It's a tool for your growth. It's a tool that you can outgrow. And another thing, I guess I should tell you about meditation, is if you have trouble meditating, if you try this, and after a month, you just can't keep the thoughts out of your mind, there are some technologies that will help you, sort of like training wheels on the bicycle. And you can make these yourself. You can buy them, but you can make them just as easily and they will work for you. If you Google binaural beats, B-I-N-A-U-R-L, aural as in sound, binaural beats. If you do that over Google, you'll get lots of things. And pick a site where you can create your own binaural beats. Many sites will do that, and they'll ask you things like, what frequency, let me explain what a binaural beat is. A binaural beat is a technology where we put one frequency in one ear with a headset. You're wearing a headset. You have one frequency here, say 100 hertz, another frequency here, say 104 hertz, and those sounds mix at the corpus callosum, which is the center between the two hemispheres, right down between the two hemispheres. That area is called the corpus callosum. And these signals mix there and produce the beat frequency, which is the difference between the two frequencies. So 100 and 104, you get a 4 hertz beat signal. Your brain will entrain to that 4 hertz beat. which means if you were wearing an EEG, brainwave monitor, the energy would start to all go toward the theta state, which is around 4 hertz. So that's puts you, it kind of pushes you gently into a theta state, which is a really good meditation state. So if you just have a lot of trouble, part of your trouble will be that you've never really experienced it, so you're not quite sure what it is it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to feel like and how it is. And without that recognition, how do you know if you're doing it or not? You know, one of those problems. Then Google the binaural beats, go to the site where you can make your own. You can just record it on your computer, and then from your computer you can put it on a, you know, you can download it to your iPod or some player. And what you want to do is find a center frequency, you know, your fundamental frequency, like the 100 hertz, that suits you. Now, males tend to like a little lower frequency, like 100 hertz. Females tend to like a higher frequency, anywhere from the 100 hertz up to like 500 hertz. It's just whatever feels comfortable to you. Something that feels sort of relaxing. Don't pick anything that makes, you know, that jangles your nerves. Pick something that sounds okay. And then you want a difference of 4 hertz. So if you pick 500, then it would be, say, 500 and 504. Or 390, you know, I mean, 496 or 500. You know, what, it doesn't matter as long as the difference is around 4 hertz. And if you want to get really picky, it's actually something like 3.875, but now you're cutting hairs, you know, it doesn't really matter. Somewhere around 4 hertz, that's the theta state. And that oscillation at your corpus callosum will push you in that theta state, and that's the same state that the gentleman back here was saying. When we did that little meditation yesterday, I felt this pulsation. That pulsation is at about 4 hertz that he was feeling. 4 hertz, four pulses a second. Okay. So that's a tool that if you have trouble meditating, do that and it will put you in a meditation state. All you have to do is relax, have no expectations, no anxiety, just listen and be, and you will end up in a good meditation state. So then you'll know what a meditation state is. Now, a lot of people use binaural beats all the time. Every time they meditate, they have a headphone on. Well, think of the binaural beats as training wheels. When you were 6 years old and first climbed on a bicycle, they may have had training wheels on them. And those are the little wheels that stick off to the side and keep the bike from falling over. And that was good, because otherwise you would have fallen over with it, and then you wouldn't have wanted to try anymore because it would have hurt. So your mother and father got the bike with training wheels so that you'd have a good experience and wouldn't fall off. But eventually, you got to where you didn't need them. Not only that, they tended to get in the way. And if you were ever going to be a good bike rider, you need to take them off. And that's sort of the way it is with binaural beats. It's a wonderful technology to get you started. You may use it for a year or two, but eventually you should outgrow it. You won't really need it anymore because you've been there, you've had that point consciousness state and back dozens and dozens of times. Now you ought to try to wean yourself off of it. And it may be a little difficult, but it won't take you too long. And then you'll find out that the binaural beat actually has a negative side. It puts you in that theta state, and it holds you in that theta state. You're not going anywhere else. You just stay there. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because the theta state, the point consciousness, is the doorway. You want to be able to explore beyond that. So you don't want to be anchored at that one frequency. You want to be free to go wherever you want to go. And that does tend to fix you there. Yeah, I didn't realize that myself until much later. I'd gone back to the Monroe Institute. Oh, this has probably been after I'd been away from it for a decade or so. And a guy there, Skip, he was real, wanted to show me. He was real excited about the new binaural beat that he and the Monroe Institute had developed and so on. So he wanted to put me in the booth and put on the headsets and let me tell me what I thought about it. And he also wanted me to do some special work for him, something that he needed some help with in his personal life that I could help with my intent. So he put that beat on, and sure enough, as soon as it started, there you were, you know, it pulled you right into the state. So then I listened to it for a little while, and I said, yeah, that's pretty nice. I like that. And I said, okay, now I'm going to go do the work you asked me to do. And I started to go, and it was like a big rubber band was around me. You know, I started to go out right back in that same state. I couldn't change. It was very difficult to change my mental focus, to switch to other data streams, because I was locked in. And that was the first time I realized that those training wheels had a downside. They put you there, but they keep you there. Just like the training wheels on the bike. They hold you up, but they don't let you go around corners or do anything, because there's these big wheels sticking out on the sides. You can't lean your bike much when you go around a corner. So anyway, don't get addicted to them in the point that you can't go without them. Wean yourself off of them after a year or so. But you can use them, and it's easy to do. It's a simple sight. One other thing I might say, that if you think it's going to be difficult for you, you can give your consciousness a little break by stepping the frequencies down slowly. Right now, we're in a beta state. You know, we're in alpha states like 10 hertz. Beta, you know, the theta is like 4. So we're at the 14, 15, 18, 20. We're in that range here in a beta state. And you can start there. So start at 15 or 18 or something, and then every, say, minute or every 30 seconds or whatever you want, you can step it down, say from 15 to 14 to 13 to 10 to 9, 8, you know, on down to 4. So instead of wham, you know, getting jumped into 4, if that's a bit of a transition, then all you have to do is make that difference between the two frequencies. Start with 10, then go to 9, then go to 8, and so on. And the software will let you do that. The software will let you design that. Design something for you, try it for at least a month or two, then decide whether you think something else might work, then try something else. This is experimental. It's not, here's how to do it, here's the recipe. It's, here are the tools. Go find out what works for you. So try it. But try each one for about a month, because it takes a little while to get used to it. And then if you try this and try that, then you may find out after 10 tries that number 3 was really the best one. Well, then stick with number 3 for a year or two, but then after a year or two, try them again, because you're different now. What was the best might not be the best anymore. And after you've done it for a while and you've gone, then the step downs start to be just tedious. You don't need them. You just go there and that's fine. But sometimes some people get a little lost when it goes too fast. So these are all just technologies and things for you to play with, and it may take you 2 years or 3 years to settle out on exactly what works best for you. But this is not a short-term endeavor. You should be thinking in terms of the rest of your life rather than in next week. So you do this with the long term. If it takes me 2 or 3 years to find out what suits me best, it's okay. 2 or 3 years come, then you'll have it figured out, then you'll go on. Don't take the short-term thing. Oh, I worked at this for 3 days, nothing worked, I quit. See, that's not the right attitude. So anyway, a little advice on those of you who have trouble meditating. That will help you. That will put you in that state, whether you really, you know, could get there on your own or not. All right. Changing the world is a subject that kind of falls into this thing. We often want to change the world. We feel the need to do something important, to do something significant. You know, what can we get involved in that's really going to make a difference? We have that sort of an attitude, and we join organizations, we do other things, we give money to this group or that. We want to make a difference. We want to be part of that solution. So what can we do to make a difference in the world? How do we change the world? The most potent and important way you can change the world is to change yourself. It sounds a little unbelievable. What a little old me, changing me, how would that affect the world? That is the most potent way that you can change the world, is to change yourself. Because as you grow up, you affect everybody around you. As you grow up, you kind of help everybody around you grow up. And that will help them grow up, and then they'll help other people to grow up. And that's the biggest thing you can do. And it's the only change, like I say, you can make in people. Now we have sometimes, we want to make political changes. We want to make changes at work and other things. But the fact is that those changes, we're having some hail out there, aren't we? Yeah. Can everybody still hear okay? Are we all right? Okay. Well, those changes, those kinds of changes that you might want to make that are institutional or political, those changes are generally not long-term. Those changes are just temporary. If you change, we work real hard at politics, so we change who's in office. And then we're mostly disappointed because whoever's in office, it seems to be more of the same than it is something really very radically different. The changes are short-lived, and even if that change, that political change, is radically different, that person can only stay in that job so long before he's either too old or whatever and is gone, and then somebody else. So those kinds of changes are temporary. They're not long-term. And you're always going to end up with something that's like us, because that's what ends up there. So the thing to do is to change yourself. You want to change the world? Change yourself. Become love. And that is a long-term change that will affect hundreds of people. Because if we can change the way people think and the way people feel and the way people approach life, if we can make this if we can spread this idea that love is the answer and that this is how we interact, all those other problems will fix themselves. All your political problems will go away if the majority of the population is not fear-based. All those institutional problems will go away. All of those food problems will go away, the corporate problems, all the things that we now sit around and gripe about, those big things that are out there in our environment that we can't change, but they get us, they hurt us, they give us poor quality food because it's more profitable than high quality food, or what they're doing in the schools to our children, or what they're not doing for the education and the politics, and what they're not doing, and how the poor people never get a break, and on and on and on it goes, and we talk about all this stuff, but all of those problems will solve themselves if first you solve the problem of fear in individuals. So you see, if we had a population, or even 2/3, or even 1/3 of a population, because 1/3 of the population would suck in the other 2/3 just by example. All those problems that we want to solve would just go away, because people would be cooperative, people would be dealing from love. They wouldn't tolerate anything else. They'd become intolerant. Just a joke. They wouldn't want anything else. Their leaders, the people would have to be like that, because that would be seen as a good kind of person. Right now, a good kind of person is the guy that has the biggest club and the best propaganda. You see, that wouldn't be the case anymore. That's a fear-based reality produces that. So if we fix ourselves, we fix the whole system. So see, the problem with our system isn't an imperfect system. It's not that we're socialists instead of capitalists, or capitalists instead of socialists, or communists, or any other kind of ist. None of those schemes for economics or politics are very important. What's important is the quality of the people. That's what generates the quality of the leadership. The leadership will represent us. If we are love-based and not fear-based, they will be too eventually. So that's why I say if you really want to change things, you want to become part of the solution rather than part of the problem, and I mean change things on a big scale. It's really true that just by you growing yourself up and becoming love, that's the biggest contribution you can make to the rest of the world, is to become part of that, because that's the solution. You see a bunch of communists who are entirely love-based, and a bunch of capitalists who are entirely love-based, and a bunch of socialists who are entirely love-based all turn into be the same thing, because they all care about, they all care about each other. It all morphs, it all evolves then into the same thing. We need these structures to regulate our violence. We need these structures to regulate our bad attitudes, our greed. That's why we need the structures. That's what most of our laws do. They regulate our bad decisions, our fear, our violence, our greed. We want, I want what you have. So we have laws that prohibit that. If we didn't have people who were very fear-based, we wouldn't need all those sort of things, you see? So the system itself is not all that relevant. It's the people. And whether they're fear-based or love-based, it's important here. The rest of the problems, the inequality of income, the racism, the discrimination, and all of that just goes up like smoke, it vanishes on its own. So though it's good to root for those causes and be a part of them and give your money to them and give your time and energy to them, realize that what you will accomplish through that means is temporary. You'll change leadership, and that'll change again, and eventually your leadership will represent the people. And if the people are fear-based, so will be the leadership. And if the people are love-based, so will be the leadership. That's how we create our own reality. So you want to live in a love-based reality where everybody's cooperative and they care about each other, then you have to change yourself. Which, fortunately, is the one thing you can do, is you can change yourself. All right, let's see. Okay. Okay. So that kind of brings us back to the idea again that we started with, which is stuff happens, and we get to deal with it, and how we deal with it is what's important. So you see how that's a very simple thing, and we started out with that, and it sounds like such a simple recipe, but now you see that has international ramifications, that has political ramifications, that solves problems of racism and problems of, those who are powerful taking advantage of those who aren't. So that's the whole concept, is that you just need to have an ability to live gracefully with uncertainty. Because that's a lot of it, is living gracefully with uncertainty. You have uncertainty, you want to go out and fix it and make it certain. Live gracefully with that uncertainty and deal with it as it happens. Learn to accept it. All right. So we talked a little about changing the world, and we've talked about how to go about changing yourself. One thing I might add to the discussion we had on changing yourself is it is a long-term process. All of this that we're talking about is a long-term process. Do not expect to change yourself in a month or even 2 or 3 months. You begin the process, and if you stay with the process, it will work. What I'm telling you will actually work and change your life, but it won't do it quickly. And you do have to have courage. When you face that fear, your initial response is going to be to turn away, to go back, to leave it alone. It's frightening, to change yourself, because yourself is what you know. All right, your life might not be perfect, but at least you know it works. If you're going to change yourself, you're going to be something different, and you don't know whether that's going to work or not. That's frightening. That's uncertainty. And one of the most fundamental things we fear, and when you look back at what your fears are, you'll find that uncertainty is one of the biggest fears that we have. We don't like change because change is out of our control. Once we're changing, what are we going to be? What if it's worse than what I am now? And the instinct is to run away. Don't change. Oh, you start making excuses. Oh, it's okay. It's really not so bad. I don't mind it the way it is. It's not really me anyway. It's really the other people that need to change. And we kind of have that dialogue with ourselves and we walk away from it. So the thing that actually takes the most time isn't really the actual change itself. It's the screwing up the courage enough to make the change. That's what takes the lion's share of the time. So if you can do that because you're committed, then this won't take so long. But if you're like most of us, that's the hard part, is creating the courage that enables you to go on through uncertainty. Now, if you're going to not try to manipulate what's up front, control, we want to control everything because then there's no uncertainty. Uncertainty terrifies us because we don't know what's going to happen. If you have this control, that creates certainty. That's why we like to control. That's our whole point of controlling. You let that go, and you're going to stay focused in the moment and just deal with what happens rather than try to control what happens. You have to learn to live with uncertainty gracefully. That's a very hard thing to do. So if you want a task to start off with on this process, that would just be thinking about living gracefully with uncertainty, things that you don't know. Parents have a hard time with their children, right? Because it's very uncertain when there's children. They're 15 or 16, and they're going out with their friends in a car, and there's a lot of uncertainty there. What might they be doing? What kind of trouble might they get in? Could they be in an accident? And all this uncertainty. We need to let that go. We need to live gracefully with uncertainty, and we do that by just saying, well, why I'm here is to make good choices for whatever happens, not to control what happens. So I'll just accept the way it happens. Now, I'll try to warn my children and educate them and give them guidance, but I have to let them go, and I have to accept what happens and deal with it gracefully. And the children is just an example. That's an easy example because all of us had that same kind of fear for our children when they go away and we no longer have any control of them and they're out there on their own, riding around with 5 other kids in a car someplace and who knows where. But the same thing applies to every part of your life. That's why we control. Fear of uncertainty. That creates a lot of fear for us. So realize that going in. When you start working on these things, realize that the first thing you're going to get is pushback from yourself. Yourself is going to say, back off. This is crazy. Who knows what might happen? It might be terrible. You're okay the way you are. The ego doesn't want to be gotten rid of. The ego will resist. The ego is fear. Fear, it's your fear reaction to things. So expect that. Expect that pushback. That's where it requires courage and focus and what's the right word? Maybe dedication. That you're going to do this, that this is important. And if you don't have that, it won't work. So you have to be ready to make those changes. Until you're ready, it won't happen. So that is a thing that must be dealt with, is the pushback you'll get. But stay with it. It will. And the hardest time, the most difficult time you'll have is initially. The very first times you try to locate your fears and find them identify them, and then stand up to them with courage, that's the toughest time you'll have. If you do stand up to them, it just gets easier and easier and easier to find those fears and get rid of them. The first ones are the hardest. So you got to have courage there and be strong. Let's see. Okay. All right, let's, I'm trying to fill in some things here that we mentioned earlier, but we just kind of glossed over them. I just mentioned them, and now I want to talk a little bit more about them. Early on, as you recall, I mentioned that you have to interpret everything that you get. You get data, you have to interpret it. Okay. That has a more far-reaching implication than you might think. Because you interpret information, the result that you get of your interpretation is colored by your own understanding and your fear and whatever. So you not only have to be skeptical of everything that comes to you from the outside, but you have to be most skeptical of all of the stuff that comes from you from the inside. How much of what you get is not really the truth as you see it in your reality? How much of it is just your interpretation? So this is where the skepticism helps. Not just skeptical of what's out there, but skeptical of what you get. Be very skeptical of the things that happen to you when you meditate. The things that happen to you if you go out of body. You need to be skeptical of these things. You need to say, what was that? What just happened there? What's the meaning of it? All right, I know I saw it like this and I felt it like that, but what's the real significance here? What was it? Because you colored it. You gave it flesh. You know, it was a skeleton and you put the flesh on it. You made it look one way or another. So don't take those things too literally, but look for the meaning in them. Don't care too much about what literally happened. What was the symbology? What were the metaphors? What did it mean? See, it's a lot like interpreting dreams. Dreams are like that too. It's not so much that you ran and jumped over a cliff. That's not really what it was about. It was about fear. It was about the feeling of being out of control and something was going to overtake you. And then start dealing with those things and use your dreams as kind of a springboard to help you do this. You can solve a lot of these problems in dreams as well as solve them here. Dream reality is another reality for you to work in. Okay, talked about that. Okay, here's a point we haven't talked about yet. Negative. We have to be careful about the words we use. Okay, particularly negative words. You hear me say things like, you need to get rid of your fear, you need to get rid of your ego, your beliefs, your needs, your wants, desires. And sometimes people in their head say, oh, desires? I need to get all my desires? What about my desire to grow? You say, well, it's not that there's an inconsistency there, is that words are not all that precise. And we have to not get too wound up around the details, but look between the lines for what's important. Let's see. Wants, desires, and expectations. Must these always be negative things? Wants, desires, and expectations? No, not for parent and child relationship, not for a employer-employee relationship. If you're the employer, you'd better tell your employees what you expect, what you desire for them to do, right? What your needs are, because they need to know that. So in that sense, these are good things. My point is, don't get wound up around the words and then get dogmatic about what the words mean. You have to be open here. So it depends on context, on the context. If you have the context of I want you to do this or I want you to be this, that's a demand, okay? If instead you think, I'd like to set up an environment that will help you make better choices, okay? Add clarity to your process. I want to offer valuable information, insight, experiences, or an opportunity without any pressure, without any specific advice, so that you can make the best choices possible. You see, if you approach that way, that's a gift. If you approach with, here's what you should do, here's the choices you should make, this is the way you should be, and this is the way you think, that's a demand. That's your demand, and it's coming from your ego because I want you to be this way. The idea that I will give you the gift of an environment that lets you make your own decision and lets you have the consequences of that decision, and however it helps you grow up. You see, that's a different kind of thing. So in either one, you know, you could talk about, you know, these, you know, needs, beliefs. Even the word belief. You know, we've talked about belief being one of the big problems because it's a trap. But even there, you can't be dogmatic about the words. I've had people write to me and they say, well, I disagree with you about belief. Says belief is real special to me because whenever I get to something that I'm not sure about, I have a tentative belief. I say, well, I'm gonna believe this until I find out differently. But I'm still open to finding out differently. So my belief is just a tentative belief, and I then build probability, I guess, around that belief, how much I should believe it or how little I should believe it, and the belief can come or go. Well, I listened to that, and he was saying, well, belief is good. That's how I deal with problems, you know. And I said, well, that's just open-minded skepticism. It's the same thing. You're just calling it belief. So you can use these words in many ways. The words themselves are not bad. It's the context. You have to look at the context. So in some contexts that people use, belief is just fine because they don't mean that they're going to believe it and then throw everything else out. They mean they're going to temporarily believe it till they find out more about it. It's just open-minded skepticism in another form described by belief. The important message here is don't take any of my words or any of the things I tell you dogmatically. I hear that sometimes. Oh, Tom said that, you see, and it's like, no. It's not what Tom said. What does it mean to you? What's its significance? The words are not important. The ideas are important. If my idea of open-minded skepticism is your idea of, you know, temporary belief or whatever, then fine, that's a really good idea. Use your own words. Use your own metaphors. You don't have to use my language. You don't have to use my metaphors. There's no real advantage in that. You don't have to use my model. In fact, my big toe, the purpose and point of my big toe is to help you develop and generate your big toe. Your big toe is really what's important, not mine. This comes out of my experience. Your experience can't be my experience. We have different experiences. You have to build your own philosophy, your own big toe. And it has to be functional, and if you have open-minded skepticism or temporary beliefs or whatever you want, then develop what works for you. But don't say, all right, I've developed this works for me, I'm done. You're never done. You develop what works for you and you're still skeptical. There's very few things in your assessment of reality that should have probabilities of 1 or 0. A 1 saying, absolutely, that's it. that is it, that'll always be it, it's a 1. Probability that that is truth is 1. The probability that that is truth is 0. These are the always, never kind of words. Always, never, forever, all those things turn out to be not so helpful words. If you stay skeptical, then you build your own big toe and you say, well, now this is the way I think the world works, but I'm open to change. And I think I'm probably right, maybe 0.7, 0.9, 0.99, but hardly ever 1. 1's a problem. 1 means you reject other things because you're certain. So it gets us back to living gracefully with uncertainty. If you actually approach the world with this idea of open-minded skepticism, that means you have to live with uncertainty. That's what the skepticism does. It says, you're not certain. I think this is the way it works. This kind of makes sense to me, but I'm open. It might change. Now you can learn. So it's not my big toe. It's not my words, and certainly don't turn my words into any sort of a dogma. It's not your big toe. That's why I named it my big toe. You see, it wasn't because I was so proud of it that I wanted you to know it was mine. It's my big toe. It's my big toe because it's my experience that developed it. You have to develop your own big toe. That's your experience. Because if you want to go forward on the basis of my experience, that's a belief. Well, you can do it as a temporary belief, right? That's open-minded skepticism. You can take that step and say, well, that's the best thing I've heard. I'll go with that till I hear something better, but always test it. Don't just accept it. Question it, test it. You can't do that if you don't make an effort to do it and apply it. If it's all up in your head, then you can't even test it, really. And you're stuck. What can you do? Nothing. You can believe it or you cannot believe it. Neither one's of any value, and you're stuck there. So when I tell you you need to actually get involved and work with this, if it's going to be of any value to you, you have to do that. You have to generate your own big toe. Mine's just a stimulus, maybe a guide to go by, kind of a template to look at, but it's not yours until it's your experience. So that's an important thing. We don't want to get dogmatic here about the words and the meaning and that this is the way. This is not the Bible, this is not the way, and these are the words, and it has to be this way, and don't look at this that way. Look at this as suggestions, opportunities, things to explore, things to try. If it makes your life better, keep doing it. If it doesn't, alter your approach. If it still doesn't, leave it alone. Go someplace else. There are literally thousands of paths that you can get that'll take you to the same place. You might want to go join a monastery. You might want to take this course or that course or read these various things. They all have different paths, but it'll all take you to the same place. And all of those paths are valid. It's not like this is the best path. This may be the best path for some people. Other people, some other path might be a better path for them. It might suit them better. So always stay open to the path you take. And once you take a path, always be open to changing it some other way. So now what I'm doing now is I'm creating a lot of uncertainty, you see, in your minds. I'm creating a lot of uncertainty because you were looking for an answer, and here's the answer, and now and you start to go, okay, I got the answer now, that feels good. I don't have to keep looking for that. I've got the answer, and now I'm telling you, you have to create your own answer. It has to be your answer. So now you're back in uncertainty. You don't know what your answer is because you're still in the process of becoming. Live gracefully with uncertainty. Say, okay, I'll be me. I'll apply these things just to see how it works out. It'll be an experiment. I'll see if this guy's telling the truth or not. I'll do my own meditations and see what happens. So that's the way I want you to leave here, not with hook, line, and sinker, right? That's not it. I don't want you to do that. I want you to leave with the idea that now you have a way to go out and be yourself in any way you wish to do that, but now you've got a little more information, a little more insight about what that might mean and who you might be with yourself and where you might want to take yourself and why you might want to go there. But you still have to decide what and how and when and where you're going to do it.